The air was thick with an eerie anticipation, the temperature a brisk 48 degrees Fahrenheit, as the soldiers of the Allied forces emerged from the dense, misty veil that shrouded the dawn-laden landscape. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves wafted through the air, mingling with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the faint hint of diesel fuel, a potent reminder of the mechanized warfare that was about to unfold. The year was 1944, and the world was embroiled in a maelstrom of conflict, as the greatest war the world had ever known raged on with unrelenting fury. As the soldiers moved cautiously through the underbrush, the soft rustle of their uniforms and the creaking of their equipment served as a stark reminder of the gravity of their mission. They were armed with an array of firearms, each one meticulously crafted to deliver maximum lethality on the battlefield. The M1 Garand, with its sleek, walnut stock and powerful .3006 Springfield cartridge, was the primary rifle of choice for the American forces, its 8-round en-bloc clip a testament to the ingenuity of the engineers who had designed it. The M1A1 carbine, with its shorter barrel and lighter weight, was also a popular choice, its .30 carbine cartridge delivering a slightly smaller punch, but with greater agility and maneuverability. The soldiers' helmets, adorned with the distinctive insignia of their respective units, glinted dully in the faint, early morning light, a stark reminder of the esprit de corps hat bound them together as a cohesive fighting force. The M1 helmet, with its characteristic steel pot design, was a stalwart companion to the soldiers, its rugged, corrugated exterior, a testament to the durability and versatility of the American military's equipment. The helmets were worn low over the soldiers' eyes, their chin straps securely fastened, as they peered intently into the gloom, their senses heightened to the maximum as they scanned the terrain for any sign of enemy activity. To their left, the distant rumble of artillery fire echoed through the valleys, a low, ominous growl that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The 105mm M2A1 howitzer, with its 23-foot 6-inch barrel and powerful 33-pound projectile, was a behemoth of a gun, capable of delivering a withering barrage of high-explosive shells onto the enemy's positions. The sound of its report was like thunder, a deafening crash that seemed to split the air asunder as the shell hurtled through the atmosphere, its trajectory a perfect glowing arc that ended in a blaze of fire and fury. As the soldiers moved forward, the silence between them was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves or snapping of twigs beneath their feet. They were a mixture of seasoned veterans and green recruits, each one bringing their own unique perspective to the battle-scarred landscape. Some had seen action before, their faces etched with the lines of experience and the weight of their responsibilities. Others were new to the fray, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anticipation as they steeled themselves for the ordeal that lay ahead. The terrain itself was a dense, primordial forest, the trees towering above the soldiers like sentinels, their branches creaking ominously in the gentle pre-dawn breeze. The underbrush was thick and impenetrable, a tangled web of thorns and vines that seemed to reach out and snag at the soldiers' uniforms like skeletal fingers. The ground beneath their feet was spongy and uneven, a morass of decaying leaves and damp earth that threatened to suck the boots right off their feet. Every step was a carefully considered move, each soldier weighing their options with a deliberation that bordered on the agonizing, as they picked their way carefully through the treacherous landscape. In the distance, the faint, gray outlines of buildings could be seen, their roofs a tumble of broken tiles and shattered rafters, their walls pockmarked with the scars of artillery fire and small arms. The village of St. Lo, a once thriving community nestled in the heart of Normandy, was now a battleground, its streets and alleyways a killing zone, where the soldiers of the Allied forces and the German Wehrmacht clashed in a frenzy of blood and steel. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and cordite, the acrid scent of burning buildings, and the sweet, coppery tang of blood hanging heavy over the battlefield like a malignant specter. As the soldiers advanced, the silence between them grew thicker, a palpable, almost tangible thing that seemed to weigh upon their shoulders like a physical force. They knew that they were approaching the enemy's positions, that the German forces were dug in and waiting, their guns and machine guns trained on the advancing troops like cold, unforgiving eyes. The soldiers, hearts pounded in their chests, their breath coming in short, ragged gasps, as they steeled themselves for the maelstrom of violence that was about to erupt around them. The sound of their own breathing was like a death knell, a morbid reminder of their own mortality, as they prepared to face the enemy in a frenzy of bullets and blood. In this frozen moment, time seemed to stand still, the world holding its breath as the soldiers of the Allied forces poised on the brink of their greatest challenge. The Germans, entrenched in their fortified positions, waited with bated breath, their guns at the ready, as the two armies clashed in a frenzy of violence and fury, each one determined to emerge victorious from the crucible of war. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the curtain was about to rise on a drama of blood and steel. As the soldiers of the Allied forces launched themselves into the fray, their guns blazing, their hearts afire, with a fierce and unyielding determination to triumph over their enemies, no matter the cost. As the armies clashed on the outskirts of the valley, the intricate dance of warfare began to unfold. The commander of the Allied forces, a seasoned veteran of countless battles, had carefully devised a strategy to outmaneuver the enemy. The plan involved a complex series of flanking maneuvers, designed to exploit the weaknesses in the enemy's defenses and create opportunities for a decisive blow. The Allied army, comprising of heavily armored infantry, agile cavalry, and precise artillery, was divided into 4 distinct divisions. The first division, consisting of the most battle-hardened troops, was positioned on the left flank, anchored by a dense forest that provided natural cover and protection from enemy fire. The second division, comprising of a mix of infantry and cavalry, was placed in the center, with the task of pinning down the enemy's main force and preventing them from reinforcing their flanks. The third division, made up of lightly armored troops and skirmishers, was deployed on the right flank, with the objective of harassing the enemy's exposed flank and disrupting their supply lines. The fourth division, a reserve force of fresh troops and cavalry, was held back, ready to be committed to the battle at the decisive moment. As the battle commenced, the Allied army began to execute its plan. The first division, under the cover of a withering artillery barrage, advanced slowly and deliberately, using the forest as a shield to protect themselves from the enemy's counterfire. The division's leftmost regiment, a unit of heavily armored men at arms, led the way, using their large shields to absorb the impact of the enemy's projectiles and create a wall of steel that allowed the rest of the division to advance behind them. Meanwhile, the second division, in the center, launched a series of feints and demonstrations, designed to draw the enemy's attention and prevent them from reinforcing their flanks. The division's cavalry, composed of lightly armored horsemen, darted back and forth, launching swift and precise attacks on the enemy's exposed positions, before quickly retiring to safety. The infantry, supported by artillery fire, then advanced, using their pikes and halberds to push back the enemy's lines and create openings for the cavalry to exploit. On the right flank, the 3rd Division, using their speed and agility, launched a series of rapid and unexpected attacks on the enemy's flank, aiming to disrupt their supply lines and create chaos and confusion. The division's skirmishers, armed with bows and slings, provided covering fire, as the lightly armored troops made daring raids on the enemy's exposed positions, before quickly retreating to safety. As the battle raged on, the Allied army's plan began to bear fruit. The enemy's lines, stretched to the breaking point, began to waver and falter. The Allied army's flanking maneuvers had created holes and gaps in the enemy's defenses, which the reserve division, now committed to the battle, was poised to exploit. The stage was set for a decisive blow. 1T. The hat would shatter the enemy's will to resist and secure a crushing victory for the Allied army. The reserve division, consisting of fresh troops and cavalry, was now deployed on the field, with the objective of delivering the coup de grace. The division's commander, a brilliant and audacious tactician, had devised a plan to outflank the enemy's remaining forces, using the momentum of the Allied army's advance to carry the day. The division's cavalry, consisting of heavily armored knights, was positioned on the left, with the task of smashing through the enemy's weakened lines and creating a breakthrough. The division's infantry, supported by artillery fire, was positioned on the right, with the objective of pinning down the enemy's remaining forces and preventing them from escaping. The division's center, comprising of a mix of infantry and cavalry, was tasked with delivering the decisive blow, using their combined strength to shatter the enemy's will to resist. As the reserve division advanced, the enemy's lines began to crumble. The Allied army's flanking maneuvers had created a situation in which the enemy was unable to respond effectively, and their defenses were on the verge of collapse. The stage was set for a glorious and decisive victory, one that would be remembered for generations to come. The Allied army's commander, a master tactician, watched with pride and satisfaction as his plan unfolded. The enemy's weaknesses had been exploited, and their defenses had been breached. The outcome of the battle was no longer in doubt, and the Allied army was poised to secure a crushing victory. The commander's tactics had been ingenious, and his troops had executed them with precision and skill. The battle was now entering its final phase,
with the Allied army poised to deliver the decisive blow. The enemy's forces were in disarray, and their will to resist was crumbling. The Allied army's victory was all but assured, and the stage was set for a triumphant conclusion to the battle. The commander's tactics had been proven correct, and his troops had fought with valor and distinction. As the dust settled, the Allied army's victory became clear. The enemy's forces had been defeated, and their defenses had been breached. The Allied army had secured a glorious and decisive victory, one that would be remembered for generations to come. The commander's tactics had been brilliant, and his troops had fought with courage and skill. The battle had been a testament to the Allied army's strength and cunning, and a demonstration of the commander's mastery of the art of war. The tactics employed by the Allied army had been complex and sophisticated, involving a series of intricate maneuvers and clever deceptions. The enemy had been outmaneuvered and outflanked, and their defenses had been breached. The Allied army's victory had been the result of careful planning and precise execution. The commander had devised a brilliant plan, and his troops had carried it out with skill and precision. The enemy had been defeated, and the Allied army had emerged victorious. The battle had been a triumph of tactics and strategy, and a testament to the Allied army's superiority on the field. In the aftermath of the battle, the Allied army's commander was hailed as a hero and a genius. His tactics had been brilliant, and his troops had fought with courage and distinction. The enemy's defeat had been crushing, and the Allied army's victory had been glorious. The commander's name would go down in history as one of the greatest military minds of all time, and his tactics would be studied and emulated by generations of military leaders to come. The battle had been a defining moment in the war, a turning point that had marked a decisive shift in the balance of power. The Allied army's victory had been a testament to their strength and cunning, and a demonstration of their superiority on the field. The enemy had been defeated, and the Allied army had emerged victorious. The stage was now set for the final act of the war, a climax that would be marked by the Allied army's triumph and the enemy's defeat. As the battalion advanced through the dense forest, the sounds of artillery fire and small arms echoed through the trees, creating a cacophony of chaos that made it difficult for the soldiers to communicate. The M1 Abrams tanks, with their 120mm smoothbore cannons, led the charge, providing covering fire for the infantry as they pushed forward. Tanks' tracks churned up the earth, sending mud and debris flying in all directions, while their cannons boomed out a steady rhythm of explosive shells that ripped through the enemy's defenses. Behind the tanks, the infantry soldiers moved in squads, their M4A1 carbines at the ready as they scanned the surroundings for any sign of enemy activity. The soldiers' helmets and body armor were adorned with various pouches and attachments, each one containing a specific type of ammunition or equipment that would be crucial in the heat of battle. The squad leaders carried additional gear, including first aid kits, maps, and compasses, which would aid in navigation and medical emergencies. As the battalion pushed deeper into enemy territory, the chaos of battle began to escalate. Enemy soldiers, armed with AK-47s and RPGs, emerged from the trees, firing wildly at the advancing troops. The Americans returned fire, their rifles and machine guns laying down a withering field of fire that cut down the enemy fighters. The sound of gunfire and explosions filled the air, making it difficult for the soldiers to hear anything else. Suddenly, a burst of machine gun fire ripped through the trees, striking one of the American squads. The soldiers hit the ground, seeking cover behind nearby trees or rocks as they returned fire. Their squad leader, a sergeant, quickly assessed the situation and called in a request for supporting fire from the tanks. The tanks responded, their cannons firing HIG-H explosive shells that detonated among the enemy positions, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. The infantry soldiers took advantage of the supporting fire to push forward, their rifles and machine guns firing steadily as they advanced. They moved in short, swift bounds, using the available cover to conceal themselves from the enemy. As they approached the enemy's position, they encountered a series of fortified bunkers, each one filled with enemy fighters who were determined to hold their ground. The American soldiers used their M136 AT-4 anti-tank rockets to blast open the bunkers, firing the rockets point-blank into the enemy's strongpoints. The rockets, shaped charge warheads, detonated on impact, sending a jet of superheated gas through the bunkers and killing everyone inside. The surviving enemy fighters emerged from the bunkers, their eyes blinded by the smoke and dust, and were quickly cut down by the American infantry. As the battle raged on, the American forces began to gain the upper hand. Their superior firepower and training allowed them to outmaneuver the enemy, pushing them back on all fronts. The enemy's command structure began to break down, and their soldiers became increasingly disorganized and demoralized. The Americans, on the other hand, continued to push forward, driven by their mission to capture the enemy's stronghold. The fighting continued for hours, the two sides exchanging blows in a frenzied melee of gunfire, explosions, and screams.
Galley American soldiers fought bravely, using every trick in the book to outmaneuver the enemy. They employed their M249 SAW machine guns to lay down suppressive fire, pinning down the enemy while their comrades flanked and outmaneuvered them. They used their M67 fragmentation grenades to clear out enemy positions, tossing the grenades into bunkers and trenches before storming in to finish off the survivors. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, the American forces finally broke through the enemy's defenses. The enemy's stronghold, a heavily fortified bunker complex, lay before them, its walls breached, and its defenders either dead or fled. The American soldiers stormed the complex, their rifles and machine guns firing steadily as they cleared out the remaining enemy fighters. The aftermath of the battle was a scene of utter devastation. The forest was scarred and burnt, the trees shattered by artillery fire, and the underbrush torn up by the tanks' tracks. The enemy's bunkers were in ruins, their walls cracked and broken, and their occupants either dead or wounded. The American soldiers, exhausted and shaken, moved slowly through the wreckage, tending to their wounded and gathering up the enemy's prisoners. As the dust settled, the American commander, a colonel, surveyed the battlefield, his eyes taking in the sheer scale of the destruction. He knew that the battle had been won, but at what cost? The enemy had fought hard, and the American forces had suffered heavy casualties. The colonel's thoughts turned to the families of the fallen, and the long and difficult road to recovery that lay ahead. The soldiers, too, were somber, their faces reflecting the weight of what they had seen and experienced. They knew that they had fought bravely, but they also knew that the true cost of victory would only become clear in the days and weeks to come. As they moved forward, securing the enemy's stronghold and tending to their wounded, they couldn't help but wonder what the future held, and what other challenges lay ahead. In the midst of the chaos and destruction, the American soldiers found moments of humanity and compassion. They tended to the enemy's wounded, providing medical aid and comfort to those who had been fighting against them just hours before. They shared what little food and water they had, offering sustenance to the hungry and thirsty. And they paid their respects to the fallen, honoring the memory of those who had given their lives in the pursuit of freedom and victory. As the night fell, the American forces began to regroup and reassess their position. They had won a major battle, but the war was far from over. The enemy would regroup and counterattack, and the Americans would have to be ready. The soldiers knew that they would have to push on, driven by their mission and their duty to complete the task at hand. And so, they steeled themselves for the challenges ahead, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose and their minds focused on the road to victory. As the sun began to set on the besieged city, casting a bloody orange glow over the chaos, the air was electric, with the acrid smell of smoke and sweat. The sounds of war intensified, a cacophony of clashing steel, screams of the fallen, and the thunderous boom of cannons that shook the very foundations of the earth. The earthy scent of freshly turned soil and the metallic tang of blood hung heavy over the battlefield, a noxious miasma that clung to every surface like a bad omen. The defenders, their faces set in grim determination, fought valiantly against the relentless onslaught of the enemy. Their armor, once polished to a mirror sheen, was now dented, scratched, and smeared with the viscera of the fallen. The sound of clashing steel echoed through the streets, a deadly symphony of swords, shields, and screams that seemed to have no end. Every strike, every parry, every desperate lunge was a testament to the unyielding ferocity of the human spirit. On the front lines, a young soldier, his eyes wide with fear and adrenaline, stumbled forward, his sword trembling in his grasp. The enemy closed in, a seemingly endless tide of armored warriors, their faces hidden behind helmets and visors. The soldier's breath came in short, sharp gasps, his heart racing with anticipation as he waited for the inevitable impact. And then, in a flash of steel, it was upon him. A massive, armored giant, sword raised high, ready to strike a final blow. Time seemed to slow as the soldier's eyes locked onto the enemy's, a fleeting moment of understanding passing between them. The soldier's thoughts were a jumbled mix of fear, panic, and desperation, his mind racing with the certainty of his own mortality. The enemy's sword descended, a slow-motion arc of death that seemed to hang suspended in the air, taunting the soldier with its inevitability. And yet, even as all hope seemed lost, the soldier's training kicked in.
his body reacting with a speed and ferocity that belied his fear. With a swift, economical motion, the soldier raised his shield, the impact of the enemy's sword sending shockwaves through his arm and shoulder. The force of the blow was immense, threatening to shatter the soldier's resolve and send him tumbling to the ground. But he stood firm, his feet planted wide, his teeth gritted in a snarl of defiance. The enemy's sword bit deep into the shield, the sound of splintering wood and screeching metal filling the air as the soldier stumbled backward, his vision blurring at the edges. The world around him was a chaotic, nightmarish landscape of clashing steel and screaming men, the earth shaking beneath his feet as the cannons boomed and the enemy's artillery screamed through the air. The soldier's ears rang with the cacophony of war, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the battle. And yet, even as all seemed lost, he found a spark of determination within himself, a burning resolve to survive, to fight on, no matter the cost. With a fierce cry, the soldier launched himself forward, his sword flashing in the fading light. The enemy was taken aback, his momentary hesitation giving the soldier the opening he needed. The soldier's sword bit deep into the enemy's armor, the sound of screeching metal and the enemy's scream of pain filling the air as he stumbled backward, his sword falling from his grasp. The soldier stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion, his sword raised high in triumph. The enemy looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock, pain, and admiration. For a fleeting moment, the two warriors locked eyes, a spark of respect passing between them. And then, with a swift, merciful motion, the soldier ended the enemy's suffering, his sword slicing through the air to strike true. As the enemy's body slumped to the ground, the soldier felt a surge of adrenaline course through his veins, a sense of pride and accomplishment that he had never felt before. He stood tall, his sword still trembling with the force of the blow, his heart pounding in his chest. The sounds of war still raged around him, the clash of steel on steel, the boom of cannons, and the screams of the fallen. But in that moment, the soldier felt invincible, a warrior capable of overcoming any obstacle, no matter the cost.
The battle raged on, the outcome still far from certain. The defenders were stretched thin, their lines wavering beneath the relentless onslaught of the enemy.
But the soldiers' small victory had given them a glimmer of hope, a chance to regroup and counterattack. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a dark, bloody shadow, the soldier knew that the true test was only just beginning. The night ahead would be long and brutal, the enemy's artillery pounding the city with relentless ferocity. The soldier's thoughts were a jumbled mix of fear, uncertainty, and determination. He knew that the hours ahead would be the most intense, the most brutal of the battle. But he also knew that he was not alone, that he was part of a larger whole, a band of brothers united in their determination to survive, to fight on, no matter the cost. As the darkness deepened, the soldier steeled himself for the trials ahead, his heart pounding in his chest, his sword at the ready. The enemy's artillery boomed through the night, the sound of screaming shells and crashing walls filling the air. The soldier huddled in the ruins of a bombed-out building, his ears ringing from the constant barrage. The darkness was absolute, the only sound, the steady drumbeat of the cannons, and the occasional scream of a fallen comrade. The soldier's senses were on high alert, his nerves stretched taut as he waited for the inevitable counterattack. And then, without warning, the enemy was upon them, a wave of armored warriors surging forward like a dark, unstoppable tide. The soldier's heart sank, his mind racing with the certainty of death.
But he stood tall, his sword at the ready, his shield locked into place. The enemy's onslaught was fierce, their swords and spears flashing in the faint moonlight. The soldier parried and riposted, his movements swift and economical, as he fought for his life. The battle was a chaotic, nightmarish landscape of clashing steel and screaming men, the earth shaking beneath the soldier's feet as the cannons boomed and the enemy's artillery screamed through the air. The soldier's world was reduced to a tiny, intense focus, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the battle. And yet, even as all seemed lost, he found a spark of determination within himself, a burning resolve to survive, to fight on, no matter the cost. The soldier's sword sliced through the enemy's ranks, a deadly scythe cutting down all who stood in his way. He fought with a fierce, animal intensity, his movements swift and deadly, as he carved a path of destruction through the enemy's lines. The enemy was taken aback, their momentary hesitation giving the soldier the opening he needed. The soldier's comrades rallied around him, their swords and shields locked into place as they fought to hold back the enemy's tide.
The battle raged on, the outcome still far from certain. The defenders were stretched thin, their lines wavering beneath the relentless onslaught of the enemy, but the soldiers' small victory had given them a glimmer of hope, a chance to regroup and counterattack.
As the night wore on, Lay soldier's determination never wavered, his sword slicing through the enemy's ranks with deadly precision. The enemy's artillery boomed through the night, the sound of screaming shells and crashing walls filling the air. But the soldier stood tall, his shield locked into place, his sword at the ready. The hours ticked by, each one a never-ending eternity of blood, sweat, and tears. The soldier's world was reduced to a tiny, intense focus, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the battle. And yet, even as all seemed lost, he found a spark of determination within himself, a burning resolve to survive, to fight on, no matter the cost. The soldier's story was far from over, the true test of his mettle still to come. But for now, he stood tall, his sword at the ready, his shield locked into place, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle would rage on, the outcome still far from certain, but the soldier was ready, his spirit unbroken, his will to survive unshaken. The chaos that ensued in the aftermath of the catastrophic event was nothing short of apocalyptic. The once blue skies were now a deep, foreboding gray, filled with the acrid smoke of burning buildings and the stench of death. The streets, once bustling with life, were now desolate and eerily silent, littered with the shattered remains of what was once a thriving city. The few survivors that stumbled out of the ruins were left to pick up the pieces, their faces etched with shock, grief, and despair.
The dust began to settle. The true extent of the devastation became apparent. The casualty reports were staggering, with numbers that seemed to climb by the hour. Emergency services were quickly overwhelmed, and medical teams worked tirelessly to tend to the wounded, often in makeshift facilities with limited resources. The sounds of sirens, groans, and cries for help filled the air, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. Individual stories of survival began to emerge, each one a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience in the face of unimaginable horror. There was the story of Maria, a young mother who had been trapped beneath the rubble of her apartment building. She had managed to free herself, only to discover that her husband and 2 children had perished in the disaster. Despite her unimaginable loss, Maria dedicated herself to helping others, using her skills as a nurse to tend to the wounded and comfort the grieving. Then there was the story of Jake, a former soldier who had been in the city on business. He had been caught outside when the disaster struck, and had somehow managed to find shelter in a nearby alleyway. As the dust settled, Jake emerged to find that he was one of the few able-bodied survivors in the immediate area. Without hesitation, he began to organize the rescue efforts,
using his military training to coordinate the search for survivors and provide medical aid to those in need. As the days passed, the city began to resemble a war zone. The streets were filled with the debris of destroyed buildings, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and ash. The survivors, shell-shocked and grief-stricken, wandered the streets like ghosts, searching for loved ones and trying to make sense of the senseless tragedy that had befallen them. The government, caught off guard by the scale of the disaster, struggled to respond effectively, with aid and relief supplies slow to arrive. Despite the overwhelming chaos, there were moments of hope and kindness that pierced the darkness. Neighbors who had never spoken before came together to support each other, sharing what little food and water they had. Strangers became like family, bonding over their shared experience and working together to rebuild their shattered community. The city's churches, mosques, and synagogues became makeshift shelters, offering refuge to those who had lost their homes and their loved ones. As the world watched in horror, the people of the city began the long, painful process of healing and rebuilding. It would be a journey marked by tears, anger, and frustration, but also by resilience, courage, and hope. The city would never be the same, but from the ashes of destruction, a new community would emerge, forged in the fire of tragedy and tempered by the steel of the human spirit. The international community rallied around the city, offering aid and support to the survivors. Donations poured in, and volunteers from around the world flocked to the city to help with the relief efforts. The city's infrastructure, once on the brink of collapse, began to be rebuilt, with new homes, schools, and hospitals rising from the ruins. The people, though forever changed by their experience, began to rebuild their lives, finding ways to honor the memories of those who had been lost, while forging a new future for themselves and their community. As the months passed, the city slowly began to heal. The streets,
once filled with the sounds of sirens and despair, began to echo with the sounds of laughter and children playing. The survivors, though still bearing the scars of their ordeal, began to find a sense of normalcy, a sense of purpose. They had faced the unimaginable and had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate. The city would never forget the tragedy that had befallen it, but it would rise from the ashes, a phoenix of hope and defiance in the face of adversity. The stories of survival, of courage and resilience, would be etched into the city's history, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome even the most daunting challenges. The city's people would never forget the lessons they had learned in the aftermath of the disaster, lessons about the importance of community, compassion, and hope. As they looked to the future, they knew that they would face many challenges, but they also knew that they would face them together, as a community united in their determination to rebuild and thrive. In the years that followed, the city would become a symbol of hope and resilience, a beacon of light in the darkest of times. The people, though forever changed by their experience, would emerge stronger, more compassionate, and more determined than ever before. The city would rise from the ashes, a new and vibrant community, forged in the fire of tragedy and tempered by the steel of the human spirit. The memory of the disaster would never be forgotten, but it would serve as a reminder of the city's strength, its resilience, and its unwavering commitment to hope and renewal. As the city began to rebuild, the survivors began to reflect on the tragedy that had befallen them. They began to ask questions, to seek answers, and to demand justice. The government, caught off guard by the scale of the disaster, was forced to confront its own failures and shortcomings. The people, empowered by their experience, began to demand change, to push for reforms and improvements that would prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. The city's story, though marked by tragedy and hardship, was also a story of hope and resilience. It was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome even the most daunting challenges, to rebuild and thrive in the face of adversity. The people, though forever changed by their experience, had emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more determined than ever before. As they looked to the future, they knew that they would face many challenges, but they also knew that they would face them together, as a community united in their determination to rebuild and thrive. The city's future, though uncertain, was bright. The people, empowered by their experience, would continue to push for change, to demand justice and accountability. The government, forced to confront its own failures and shortcomings, would be held accountable for its actions. The city, risen from the ashes, would emerge as a beacon of hope and resilience, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome even the most daunting challenges. The story of the city, though marked by tragedy and hardship, would be a story of hope and renewal, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a way forward, always a chance for redemption and forgiveness. As we conclude our examination of the profound and far-reaching consequences of this pivotal moment in military history, it becomes increasingly evident that the long-term geopolitical impact has been nothing short of transformational. The seismic shifts that occurred in the aftermath have continued to reverberate, influencing the trajectory of global events and shaping the modern world as we know it. The intricate web of alliances, the redrawing of national borders, and the emergence of new world powers have all contributed to a landscape that is at once familiar and yet utterly distinct from that which existed prior to this cataclysmic event. The repercussions of this conflict have been felt across multiple continents, sparking a series of domino effects that have reshaped the global order. The rise of new nations, the decline of others, and the reconfiguration of international relationships have all been, in part, a direct consequence of the upheaval caused by this singular moment in time. The aftershocks have been particularly pronounced in regions where the conflict had a direct and immediate impact, leading to ongoing tensions and periodic outbreaks of violence. However, it is also in these regions that we see the most compelling examples of resilience, determination, and the unyielding quest for peace and stability. One of the most significant and lasting impacts has been the establishment of a new international framework designed to prevent the recurrence of such devastation. The creation of international bodies and treaties aimed at fostering cooperation, promoting diplomacy, and enforcing norms of conduct among nations has been a direct response to the lessons learned from this conflict. While the success of these initiatives has been variable, with periods of heightened tension and conflict interspersed with moments of profound international cooperation, they represent a crucial step forward in the evolution of international relations. Furthermore, the conflict has led to significant advancements in military technology, strategy, and operational doctrine. The imperative to innovate and adapt in the face of unprecedented challenges has driven breakthroughs in fields as diverse as aviation, cybersecurity, and medical science. These advancements have, in turn, had far-reaching implications for both military capability and civilian life, contributing to the development of new technologies and strategies that continue to shape the modern world.
The human cost of this conflict, however, cannot be overstated. The profound impact on individuals, families, and communities has been immeasurable, with deep scars that have taken generations to heal. The stories of loss, of sacrifice, and of survival against overwhelming odds serve as a poignant reminder of the enduring spirit of humanity, even in the darkest of times. These narratives have been preserved through the efforts of historians, veterans, and their families, ensuring that the experiences of those who lived through this period are not forgotten and can serve as a lesson for future generations. In reflecting on the legacy of this conflict, it is clear that its impact extends far beyond the confines of the military history itself. It has influenced art, literature, film, and popular culture, becoming an integral part of the collective memory and cultural heritage of nations involved. The conflict has also spurred significant advances in social and political thought, leading to reforms in areas such as human rights, international law, and social justice. The struggle for peace, reconciliation, and the prevention of future conflicts has become a shared endeavor, transcending national boundaries and ideological divides. As we look to the future, it is essential to learn from the past, to understand the complexities and challenges that have shaped our world. By examining the legacy of this conflict, we can gain insights into the nature of human conflict, the importance of diplomacy and international cooperation, and the role of individual and collective action in shaping the course of history. The journey through the history of this pivotal moment is not merely an academic exercise, but a deeply personal and reflective one, inviting us to ponder our own place within the broader narrative of human experience. And so, as we bring this series to a close, we are left with a profound realization that the true legacy of any conflict is not found in its battles, its strategies, or its outcomes, but in the questions it prompts us to ask about ourselves, our values, and our place in the world. The enduring impact of this moment in history serves as a stark reminder that, despite our differences, we are all part of a shared humanity, connected by our hopes, our fears, and our aspirations for a better world. In the face of such profound reflections, we are compelled to ask, what does it mean to be a part of this global community, to bear witness to history, and to play our part in shaping its future? The answer, much like the legacy of this conflict itself, is complex, multifaceted, and deeply personal. To delve deeper into the complexities of military history and its ongoing impact on our world, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Through a series of in-depth analyses, personal stories, and historical reflections, we will continue to explore the intricacies of conflict and the human experience, aiming to provide a nuanced understanding of the past and its relevance to our present and future. By joining our community, you will become part of a broader conversation about the lessons of history and how they can inform our actions as we move forward, together, into an uncertain but hopeful future.